Thank you very much for that introduction into JAGA. Yes, as you said, technical designs are social designs, and technology is a double-edged sword. But one of the concerns that has prevailed not only in India, but if you look at the Latin American cases and worldwide, is who can wield this technology and for what purpose. And it is within this perspective, there are certain questions I have with JAGA, which we can take it out in the question answer session. One of the questions is that it's right that all the government institutions contradict with each other, and particularly when it comes to land, it is a financing instrument for any, whether it's urban development department or it's the revenue or the forest. It's also true that the administrative category and the legal tenure status of land makes it hard to create individual titles. However, the intention and the interest of the urban development department and the ways in which it recognizes what is a title and what is not a title, who's eligible, may remain a question. And how are these conflicts getting resolved in JAGA is something we can open up in the question answer section. Because one of the contention, as I understand, is this conflict between the records that people have and what the urban development department is willing to recognize. And which is where the gap actually comes in, who benefits and who doesn't benefit. Thank you, Anand. That was a very interesting speech. And I have a few questions for you because we constantly keep talking about PATA. Right? Okay. We talk about PATA as if it's a uniform document. But as, okay, my Hindi is not great. From what
no, but you can speak in English, I can understand.
No, how much I grasp your argument. Probably I'm repeating. Okay, that's my thing. But my question is, Madhya Pradesh itself, to my knowledge, had two different types of PATA, the temporary PATA and then this short-term period PATA. And then there is nothing like a permanent PATA, right? Now, what happens?
No, there are two types of PATA, temporary PATA and permanent PATA.
Permanent PATA. What
permanent PATA is for 30 years.
30 years, right? So, what happens to these PATA holders with the enactment of the PATA Act? Do they have to go through this entire process once more? That's my first question. And the second question, Solly is here, and he will also add to it perhaps in the discussion. Is this one of the contentious issues when you start doing in PATA? We are constantly talking about individual titling, and from my experience in the Katputli colony or then in the BUPP program that I work, the moment you open up this individual titling, whether you do participative mapping or you do other forms of mapping, identification of beneficiaries, the listing becomes a very contentious issue. How do you deal with it? How do you ensure who's who? Because at the end of the day, we as NGOs or interest concerned citizens, we are also pulled by this power dynamics in different ways. And we end up with one alliance or the other. And whatever we think need not harmonize with the interest of the people. And that tends to affect a lot of people from whatever little experience I've had with title. So it is in this connection, I was wondering, the UCD model never used to deal with the individual PATA, but they used to deal with the, particularly in the 70s, which was implemented by the municipality, they dealt with collective land claim, and the individual boundaries they didn't go to sort it out. What is your view on that? That's my second question. The third question, I'm really glad you raised on this question of regularization versus titling, right? Some of the international development agencies are coming back to this idea of regularization. But there is just like, depends on the different types, different governments have object to titling, they have certain resistance to titling, they also resist regularization, right? But the thing is, regularization in a sense includes consolidate your tenure security. It allows you to mobilize adverse possession. Yeah. So my question to you is that is it that we are that governments are pushing more and more titling because it becomes much more easier to narrow down, to also surveillance people, and therefore you restrict the You restrict how much of land you're willing to share with squatters dwellers. I ask this also because of look at the PMAY. This beneficiary-led component is basically such a small tool. Okay, a lot of their money is tagged down to your. If you take the Tamil Nadu case, it's a conventional eviction and relocation. So and then you're giving lease come sale. So where is this intersecting? What is your view on Madhya Pradesh? And particularly, I'm interested to hear from you as to the meaning of pata in this context, which is very nebulous in the Indian context. Thank you, Govindaji. That was an interesting presentation. You brought out the challenges that's there in implementing JAGA mission. I also have this question to you about this listing politics that you mentioned about the gap in survey and how it often results in people who are weak getting left out, right? End of the day, community is not one harmonious space, right? It has different interests and they pull it in different directions. And people with less power, it may be, it's not just individuals, it may be a community is constituted of several groups. And some groups, as in Kaputli colony, tend to be powerless. How do you deal with that? That's one issue. Then this is a question that came up in the chat, which is a very interesting question, which I've also been thinking about. We had some networking project, right, which was again done by ODA, and the only thing is they didn't get into titling, but they went into city-wide regularization, and thereby they consolidated the claims to land. Yeah? Why wasn't it? Why didn't we think about replicating it? And the second question is also about what happens to tenants in rental housing. Okay, and the third question that I wanted to ask you is: you mentioned about land records. You said people are title, but they couldn't get they couldn't use the land the way they did it. If you could elaborate on it, yeah. With this, in the interest of time, I would like it to open it to the audience for questions, and then maybe can we take two more questions and then um, two more questions and then take it. And I have one more comment for Gaudindaji for mapping. Solly Benjamin writes that the mapping power has taken the power from the community. It's an interesting point if you would like to reflect on it, because we have been going on participatory mapping, participatory mechanisms as a panacea for a lot of the conflicts, as a way to resolve the conflicts, as in whether it's with respect to land or with respect to negotiation within the community. Okay, with this, can we open it up?
I think this one must be for me. Are technologies more than tools? Do they embody a power structure to certify some claims? Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's of course it's a deep question, and I will say that in the case of JAGA, like if you would say generally how technologies are used more and more in development projects and increasingly large development projects with large budgets, yes, they are still tools, but they become more than tools. They almost end up becoming, let's say, determinants of in a certain way. I would say that what for example we often do, even ourselves, when we reflect on how we use technology in JAGA, and let's say how technology is used in the smart city mission, very different, very different, because in JAGA, let's say what the technology would or would not do, can or cannot do, what are its boundaries, are very set by what is laid out in the act, right? So for example, when let's say the act, now one can then deliberate whether what the act is saying is valid or not. Is it valid or not, whether slum is defined as a settlement of 20 households, right? So okay, that is another question. But for the technology operator, that is a parameter, 20 households. Then the second parameter is the upper ceiling of the land, the slide that Govinda showed, that in municipal councils, the upper limit is maximum occupancy of 45 square meters. In notified area councils, it is 60 square meters. So the limit for the technology person is, okay, that is another factor. Then the other factor is EWS, economically weaker sections. And if they are, let's say, occupying less than 30 square meters, then the settlement of their land right happens free. If they are non-EWS, then they will pay 1/2 of the benchmark value of land. If they are, let's say, EWS, but they occupy, let's say, 35 square meters, then they will get land rights free for 30 square meters, and the remaining 5 square meters, they will pay 1/4 of the benchmark value of land, right? So whatever is the holding, the holding cost of land for that district, for that plot of revenue plot. And so these are parameters that are emerging directly out of the act. And apart from this, because the act only specifies at a certain proportion or a certain appropriate value, it was later through official orders brought in that is 1/2 and 1/4 of benchmark value of land. And so the technology here is largely computing. It is computing based on these parameters that are given and trying to create a list of beneficiaries, eligible beneficiaries. Same question, then it comes, it is linked to what, let's say, Govinda also said regarding the tenable, untenable, or the government right now correctly says leasable or unleasable, but let's use tenable, untenable. So if you remember, I think some of you know, in the process of the survey, you see often what is happening is we don't know the slums until we have surveyed them. So surveying is also a process of learning what is the morphology of slums in small and medium towns, or any town for that matter. For example, we knew approximately, let's say, how many families are in slums because we get some sort of a picture from the 2011 census data, and then we begin with a compiled data of, let's say, the local bodies who say we have so many slums and there are so many households, which we take as a base template that, okay, show us where are these slums, and then drone surveys would happen there. But the fact is, until that survey is done, there is no record, either in the census or anywhere else, which tells you what is the area occupied by a slum. How do you even measure that, right? And will you take only the built-up area or the associated area that slum dwellers use? These were also questions we used to discuss with Manikandan. Manikandan must be remembering. And so we don't have those information. Those informations come to us. Similarly, whether the slum is tenable or not, what proportion of the slum is lying on untenable revenue, untenable revenue land, that can only be done when you have completed that geospatial survey. I'm talking of the digital part of it. Of course, you will ask a revenue officer of a particular city. He will take you there and say that, yeah, from this point to this point is jungle kism. The rest of it is government. He will show on your map, on his maps, but on that person's maps, you will not be able to relate it to, let's say, what you are seeing. That is an internalized, specialized knowledge of the revenue department. They do it based on their chain surveys. They make their maps of a particular scale. What we had to do was take soft copies of those maps, because as you know, Bhulek in Odisha or in many states, they have already digitized property records, right? All the plot numbers, khatas, and the record of rights are online. They're digital copies of that. And then you overlay what you have, let's say, surveyed of the slum on top of your revenue layer, and that's when you can find out how many households, because and that there also there is a learning. Earlier, people were mistakenly, inside the JAGA team, they were mistakenly using tenable slum and untenable slum, as in located on tenable land category or not located or land but you cannot, when you are giving individual land rights, then you cannot talk in terms of tenable slum or untenable slum. You can only talk in terms of tenable households or untenable households, because your unit is not the slum boundary. Your unit is the individual household, right? And so what our first, let's say, victory internally was to move this rhetoric away from tenable slum to untenable slums, because what was getting lost in translation, we must also realize that not everybody internally is seeing the GIS maps. Some people are seeing it, other people are seeing summaries of it, other people are concluding based on it, and lot may get lost in translation. So 50% of slums being affected by some degree of untenability, meaning some of the households are on untenable land in those slums, may easily become 1,000 slums are located on untenable land. Oh, what to do? Let's relocate 1,000, right? Now, that is the danger in this kind of leap thinking. The advantage in JAGA is that JAGA is not something, let's say, that the government is disinterested in doing and people and civil society is demanding it. This is almost like the government is demanding it, going by Gobindo for whatever combination of reasons, including electoral. So the government is basically saying, hey, if I have a barrier in giving this person land rights, I want to overcome that barrier and give this person land rights. Sometimes it may even happen that one particular slum dweller may say, we don't want. There is a slum, Birjanga Sahi in Konark, where the slum dwellers resolutely refused, and the instructions to all JAGA teams was, if slum dwellers do not want land rights, JAGA Mission withdraws. JAGA Act is not an enforcement act. It is a welfare act. It does not have the power to evict. It does not have the power to demolish. It does not have the power to force. If a slum dweller says, we are fine, we don't need, JAGA Mission has no choice but to withdraw. And in Birijanga Sahi, they withdrew because the residents of Birijanga Sahi said, we have land from our old king, 300 square meters, we don't need, right? So again, I wrap up. Technology here is just operationalizing of the parameters. So technology could not get into this role of a hegemonic factor which determines things, right? Okay, sorry, yeah. Whoever gave the shout out, thank you.
Thank you. Anand, can you respond to
Yes, yes, yes. I want
There
to
is a
speak.
question, perhaps I will lay it to you. There's been very little discussion on the role of corporate involvement in JAGA as opposed to past experiences which involved ODA. What has it meant for the
Hmm.
zero
Generally, corporate, I would say corporate involvement in JAGA is, let's say, if you will go by percentage, minuscule compared to what was happening in Bhubaneswar Smart City, for example. And the funny thing is, most of you may know, it's no secret that the principal secretary of HNUD, Mr. Mathivatnan, is a vocal opponent of the Smart Cities mission. So there have been, I've been witnessed meetings with Mr. Mathivatnan and the representatives of the IBI group. And very politely, Mr. Mathivatnan is saying that so pretty much whatever happened in Smart City didn't work, right? And they were like, yeah. So so in JAGA, the external partners come in generally when there is some sort of capacity which the government has difficulty to pull out on its own. Let's say something like, and very quickly the government internalizes. So for example, until last year, we had a scheme called the JAGA Fellows, where there were JAGA Fellows as young professionals embedded in municipalities working for JAGA. Up until last year, it was funded by the Tata Trusts. They were hired by the mission. They were funded by Tata Trust. Tata Trust support to JAGA Mission ended last month. And a substantial, if not 100%, a substantial part of those JAGA fellows then got hired as city-level technical and city-level management units across cities, and some got hired into
I'm
state.
really sorry to cut you. Please, can I ask Anand to respond? We'll come back to you. It's really interesting.
Anytime. As I said, just say shut up and I shut up anytime. So
Yes.
you don't have to wait. Don't have to wait.
Hello.
Yeah.
Acha. I just want to share one thing, that we are taking this this JAGA Mission, Patta and all as a single ownership uh, document. But I think it stands for both, for the collective also, collective ownership also, and for the single individual ownership also. Because when we are speaking about the Mohalla Sabha and Mohalla Samiti, if anything, if any infrastructure is going to happen, development is going to happen in the community, then there is a role of there is a specific role of Mohalla Samiti is decided. So we should many people are writing here that why we are talking about the individual ownership. Why I also believe in individual ownership, So I think Patta and JAGA Mission stands for both the things. So if I am wrong, please correct me. What ये मैं सोचता हूँ, ये मुझे ऐसा लगता है. दूसरा, किसी ने मुझसे कहा था कि पट्टे को एक्सटेंड करने के लिए क्या है. तो still there is a democratic space is left, small space, but there is a democratic space left in our country, in our states. If your community is powerful, they are technically strong, they know how to deal with the techniques and how to deal with the administration, they know all the laws, उनको पट्टे के बारे में पता है, सब चीजों के बारे में पता है, तो वो बहुत easily timely move कर सकती हैं. Patta can be Patta have to be renew after the this time duration finish. जब उसका टर्म खत्म होता है उसको करना जरूरी है. अगर वो नहीं होता है तो इट इज ऑटोमेटिकली कैंसल्ड. तो अगर आपका कम्युनिटी के साथ में एक स्ट्रांग होल्ड है, इफ यू हैव अ स्ट्रांग होल्ड विद द कम्युनिटी, देन कम्युनिटी टाइम ड्यूरेशन खत्म होने के पहले दे कैन गो फॉर द रिन्यूअल ऑफ द पट्टा टू द गवर्नमेंट ऑफिस. लेकिन इंदौर में कई लोगों के पट्टे के लिए रिन्यूअल के लिए गए हैं, लेकिन इंदौर या हमने भोपाल में भी कुछ लोगों के साथ ट्राई किया था, जबलपुर में भी, कि लोग रेगुलराइजेशन की तरफ गए. लोगों ने कहा है कि हमको रेगुलराइजेशन चाहिए, तो लोग जाते हैं रिन्यूअल के लिए भी एक टाइम पीरियड में, क्योंकि हमारा काम पिछले 20-25 सालों से इंदौर में है. भोपाल में हम पिछले 5 साल से हैं, लेकिन इंदौर में काफी लंबे समय से हैं. तो लोगों के साथ में एक रेपो है, लोगों को पता है कि क्या करना चाहिए, क्या नहीं करना चाहिए. दे आर वेल अवेयर अबाउट द थिंग्स. दूसरा यह है कि पट्टा 5 साल में एक बार, जो शायद ओडिशा के अंदर भी इलेक्शन के टाइम पे गवर्नमेंट थोड़ा प्रेशर में था, उनको आना था, उन्होंने पट्टे की बात करी. सेम थिंग इज हैपनिंग इन एमपी आल्सो एट एवरी इलेक्शन टाइम. लेकिन देयर इज अ फॉर्मेट, देयर इज अ स्पेसिफिक फॉर्मेट, सो यू कैन डिमांड फॉर द पट्टा एट एनी टाइम. आपको वेट नहीं करना है. देयर इज अ स्पेसिफिक फॉर्मेट फॉर द पट्टा. आपको उसके लिए आप डिमांड कर सकते हो, आप उसके लिए जा सकते हो, बातचीत कर सकते हो. दूसरा, आइडेंटिफिकेशन ऑफ बेनिफिशियरीज की बात चली. अगेन मैं एक हाउसिंग राइट वर्कर्स के तौर पे बात कर रहा हूं कि लोगों के पास में उतना समझ है, लोगों ने अपना ओन कम्युनिटी सर्वे करके रखा है. दूसरा, किसी ने यहां पर चैट बॉक्स में लिखा था कि हम क्यों टेक्निकल उस पे जाएं. देखिए, कुछ सालों पहले हमारी कम्युनिटी का जो फेडरेशन है, हमारा स्लम फेडरेशन है, उसका नाम था झुग्गी बस्ती संघर्ष मोर्चा. हमें खुद को और लोगों को खुद को झुग्गी बस्ती से बहुत सारा परेशानियां थी. देयर वर लॉट्स ऑफ प्रॉब्लम इन दिस नेम, कि वो डिग्निफाइड नाम नहीं है. फिर पीपल सजेस्टेड कि इसका नाम नया होना चाहिए, स्मार्ट सिटी जैसा कॉन्सेप्ट आ रहा है, ये आ रहा है. तो हमने उसका नाम लिखा था, लोगों ने तय करा उसका नाम नव निर्माण मंच. नाउ इट इज कॉल्ड एज अ नव निर्माण मंच. तो मुझे ये लगता है कि हमें सरकार के साथ में अगर हमको डील करना है, वी हैव टू डील विद द गवर्नमेंट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, और वो नए नए टेक्निक्स के साथ में आ रहे हैं, तो कोई बहुत बड़ा बात नहीं है कि हम टेक्नोलॉजी को लोगों के साथ में शेयर करें, लोगों को उसके साथ में कराएं. युवा के साथ ही यहाँ पर प्रेजेंट है, आईएचएस के साथ ही प्रेजेंट नहीं है. मैं आईएचएस में एक्सटर्नल कंसल्टेंट भी हूँ. हम बहुत ग्रीडी हैं अपनी कम्युनिटी को लेके. हमने युवा का सपोर्ट लिया, हमने आईएचएस का सपोर्ट लिया. कई बार हमको टिस का लगता है तो अमिता ताई सिटिंग हियर, हम लोगों ने वहां से भी सपोर्ट लेने की कोशिश करी, और लोगों को टेक्निकली स्ट्रांग बनाने की तरफ हमने कोशिश करा है. तो सर्वे उनका है, कम्युनिटी का सर्वे है, ये तमाम चीजों को लोगों को मजबूत बनाया है, लोगों को वो सारी चीजों के साथ में लेस किया है. वो एक है. दूसरा था कि टेनेबल और नॉन टेनेबल का बात किया गया. इफ यू आर लिविंग इन द स्लम, यू आर ऑलवेज ऑन द रेडार. आपको जाना है, बिकॉज जिस जमीन पर आप रहते हो वो ऑन आइडेंटिफिकेशन ऑफ बेनिफिशरीज देयर इज अ, किसी का सवाल था मैं देखता हूं. तो नॉन टेनेबल टेनेबल के लिए भी ये बात तय करी गई है कि उसको कौन तय करेगा कि वो टेनेबल है या नॉन टेनेबल है. क्योंकि जब किसी इंटरेस्ट की बात आती है तो कई टेनेबल कम्युनिटीज भी नॉन टेनेबल हो जाती है. तो ये लोगों के हाथ में है कि लोग तय करें. और कई जगह पर आप देखेंगे आपको बहुत सारी चीजों को साथ में लेके चलना होगा. अगर आप जागा मिशन की बात कर रहे हैं, आप पंजाब के अंदर जो एक्ट आया स्लम ड्वेलर्स एक्ट, उसकी बात कर रहे हैं, या पट्टा एक्ट की बात कर रहे हैं, तो अकेले आप सिर्फ एक्ट को लेके साथ में नहीं चल सकते. यू हैव टू कीप मास्टर प्लान, यू हैव टू कीप सम ओल्ड, जो पास्ट में कुछ प्रोजेक्ट्स हो चुके हैं, आपको उनको लेकर चलना है. मास्टर प्लान में कई जगह पर रीलोकेशन साइट्स जो है वो गलत लैंड यूज पे बनाई गई है, नॉन रेसिडेंशियल लैंड यूज पे बनाई गई है, वो नॉन टेनेबल एरियाज में बनाई गई है. यू हैव टू आइडेंटिफाई दोस एरियाज आपको आइडेंटिफाई करना होगा, दिस इज योर वर्क, आपको काम करना होगा, तो शायद आप इन सारी चीजों से, टेनेबल और नॉन टेनेबल जैसी चीजों से आप बहुत इजीली डील कर पाएंगे। रतुला कुछ पूछ रही हैं।
No, I was just translating.
ओके, सॉरी। तो मुझे ये लगता है कि शायद, पता नहीं, आई डोंट नो वेदर आई एम एबल टू आंसर ऑल द क्वेश्चंस और नॉट, बट मेरा ये कहना है कि इसमें लोगों का जो काम कर रहे हैं, इनका रोल काफी बढ़ जाता है, और कम्युनिटी के साथ में मिलकर कैसे आप इन सब चीजों से ओवरकम कर सकते हैं, ये आपको होना चाहिए। और स्पेशली क्योंकि मैं खुद इंडिविजुअल ओनरशिप पे बिलीव करता हूं, किसी ने लिखा है, पर मुझे लगता है कि पट्टा स्टैंड्स फॉर बोथ ओनरशिप, कलेक्टिव ओनरशिप ऑल्सो और इंडिविजुअल ओनरशिप ऑल्सो। थैंक यू।
Govinda ji?
Yes. So I think part of the question that was addressed to me is, taken by Antarin already. Just wanted to highlight two things. One is, if you see the JAGA Mission Act, it protects the people to bar of the jurisdiction of the civil court, that no civil court shall have jurisdiction to entertain any suit or proceeding in respect of any matter which the state government or the committee is constituted under this act. So part of the reason, there is also, it is written, there is a clause 11, that protection of action taken against good faith, that no officer or committees can be, or prosecuted, or they can be taken on legal action. So this was highlighted by the activist groups and the people, that there were no escalation point. The highest action that was taken by the collector in a small city like Baleshwar is to change the community organizer or some officials in case of there are issues of corruption or mismanagement. So in a way, that confidence building measures was missing, and there was a question that whether tenants were eligible. Yes, the tenants, if on when the survey was done, if one person is giving the house to 5 people, and if that person is staying before 2017, and there's a community verification, and then the tenants were eligible under this scheme. Yeah.
Would anyone like to raise any more questions? Okay.
Bhuvna, sorry, there's one more question in the chat box.
Yeah, if people are at the center of this program, this is from Jasmine. This is, I think, to Govinda. If people are center of all these programs, can't we begin with the auditing the community survey and then fill in the gaps with modern technological survey? Hello?
Yes, I could see that. People are, yes, Jasmine's question. Are if people are the center? Yes. That is a really concern area. In fact, that was not done as expected. They were not.
Can you please mute?
28.5 degree Celsius.
Excuse me, we can hear you. Can you please mute your mics, please, except for the speakers? Thank you. Go ahead, Govinda. I think you were answering, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, my signal was lost.
Yeah.
So there were not enough consultation. The typical thing I have seen in my city, that the surveyors will come, they were instructed to visit the ULB, and they straight away, whatever information is available at ULB, they used to go for the survey. So that gap, what happened?
Hello.
I think he has a poor signal.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll wait while he sort of gets back on track. Maybe Antarin can talk about one of the questions here is about who owns the data, and I think it's
It's Rike's question.
yes, uh, and also I think there is Rohit's question over there, which has not been answered yet.
What
Um,
is Rohit's question?
I think in terms of, looking at the Ahmedabad slum networking project, and, that was a different approach,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
and whether, Patta is the way to go, or why couldn't we
Yeah.
also look at something like the slum network?
I think Rohit is referring to that Himanshu Parekh, some networking,
Yeah.
that thing, no?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. So regarding the data, yes. So regarding the data, this is an ongoing process. It's a huge amount of data. It contains various levels of information. So far, this data has performed just a very simple operational aspect. But we want, of course, this data to perform different kinds of things, and ultimately, it should not only come out of the hands of, let's say, the technological organizations who so far have been kind of having it, and pass it first to the government, because government has to receive it first, has to receive it, and once they have received it, then it has to be made accessible. Ultimately, it is the, let's say, it has to be used by slum dwellers associations, by the municipalities. I would only say that this is an uphill battle. It is an uphill battle not because somebody doesn't want to do it, but because of the nature of large amount of data management. So there are many, for example, a typical thing, it's maybe a bad way of calling it, but it can be called a sweet blackmail. So if a government says to a large private vendor that, can you please hand over the data to me, the private vendor may just say, do you really want me to hand over the data to you? Be careful what you ask for, and then the government is like, okay, no, 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 maybe it's fine, you keep it, because what would I do if you hand it over? So what we are doing right now in my team particularly is working very hard with it, is that, one, we are trying to take the government and the system away from dependence on proprietary software. And we are trying to integrate JAGA data with various kinds of open data, so that this we find creative solutions to this binary system, that either we have data or we do not have data, right? And then we use, let's say, these nice new community centers that the government has made, and this is something I had fun doing, and I would say to Anand also was saying that community often, like especially Nulia community, they are far better GIS readers than, and I was joking, I was like, how can you understand this drone map? I'm very happy that you do, but how do you do it? You never saw a drone map before. And they said, we are fisher people, we GPS. So I'm like, okay, great, because they are a community. A lot of their local knowledge is based on homing technologies. How would they return from the sea back to their settlement? So they very well can spatially work. And then we saw even non-Nulia community are very, very ready to accept the maps. So government is ready to, for government, it's very, very, it's kind of goodness by necessity. Goodness by necessity, because it's like, if I am suddenly getting all this data, I'm going to get dumped. I would want, let's say, the urban local body to take its share of the data. I would want, but somebody prepare a good structure, somebody prepare a good. Now, urban local bodies cannot absorb this data. If you say you have to buy a $5,000 business version of ArcGIS, in India, it's very peculiar. Even NGOs, many NGOs believe that pirated version of ArcGIS is the only option available. Whereas we have fantastic open source software, and many NGOs have also used. There are fantastic open repositories of data which can be used. And so we are now helping the government expand. Government is very, very glad. They give us full hand. I will not say that I can answer it right now, but within a couple of months, it's an uphill task, because what happens is, when you use proprietary software, only very few people get their eyes on the data, right? When you use open source software, you only need internet and you download the software. Then a municipal body can also access the same digital file. They can open it. Because keep in mind, the data is not barred. They are not, it's not that they are not allowed to see, but even many agencies of the government, where it is being said it is digital data, but what they see is a paper printout of it or a PDF map. A PDF is digital, but PDF is not a GIS map, right? And so that requires a continuous process of capacity building, but it is object oriented capacity building. Let's say solving this issue of turning leasable non-leasable to leasable, we gave land entitlement certificates last year as a temporary interim measure while we resolve the issues of land right certificate, forest land, jungle land, revenue land. So now the government knows that it needs this, it cannot solve that using paper maps. It needs the GIS database, but it cannot do it alone. The company contracts are over. Company will not do it for you anymore. The data is hanging in a limbo. So we told the government that we are with you as partners, take over the data. We will handle it. Take over the data.
Thanks.
Now,
I
you know,
guess, sorry, Antareen, we'll have to cut you off, but we are sort of short of time, and maybe we have a bit of word from Anand and Govinda before we wrap up.
do it, but
And we say
at the
our
end,
thanks to the
anyway,
speaker of the
if anybody
chair.
wants details of the process, you just reach out.
Anand, would you like to sort of add something?
यस मुझे ये सिर्फ इतना कहना था कि लैंड जो है वो स्टेट स्पेसिफिक एक मैटर है, एक इशू है. तो अगर हम लोग इसके ऊपर काम करते हैं, स्टेट स्पेसिफिक लॉज और प्रोविजंस पे काम करते हैं, तो हम लोग बहुत हद तक फॉरेस्ट लैंड का मामला, रेलवे लैंड का मामला, जिसको हम लोग ज्यादातर नेशनल का इशू मानते हैं, तो उसके ऊपर हम लोग, या कैंटोनमेंट का लैंड का इशू, उस पर काम किया जा सकता है. अभी लगेगा बड़ा मुश्किल है वो, लेकिन उसके ऊपर काम किया जा सकता है. दूसरा ये है कि क्या इस पट्टा एक्ट में, चाहे वो एमपी में हो, चाहे वो पंजाब का हो, चाहे वो ओडिशा का हो, क्या इसमें आने वाले टाइम में कुछ अमेंडमेंट्स लेकर आया जा सकता है? क्या इसमें ऐसा प्रोविजन डाला जा सकता है कि हर 5 साल में या 2.5 साल में इसको ऑडिट करके इसके अंदर कहीं ना कहीं कुछ अमेंडमेंट्स लेकर आया जाए? रेगुलराइजेशन का अमेंडमेंट इसमें लेकर आया जाए कि अगर वो टेन्योर कंप्लीट कर लेते हैं 30 इयर्स का, तो एटलीस्ट उनको उस चीज में लाया जाए. और इसी पट्टा एक्ट में कहीं ना कहीं कम्युनिटी के लिए, मोहल्ला समिति के लिए कहीं ट्रेनिंग का प्रोविजंस होना चाहिए कि वो कैसे, जो बहुत सारा बात चल रहा है यहाँ पर अभी, कम्युनिटी सर्वे का बात चल रहा है, बहुत सारी चीजों का चल रहा है, कैसे कम्युनिटी पार्टिसिपेशन को ज्यादा से ज्यादा इंश्योर करा जाए, कैसे ज्यादा मस्ट किया जाए, उसको लेकर क्या कुछ चीजें हम इसके अंदर कर सकते हैं. बस इतना ही कहना. थैंक यू.
Govinda ji?
Yes, I have a simple suggestion that given the historicity of the slums, I think the new entity which is considered as the committee which will be lasting for 3, 4, or 5 years, Slum Dwellers Association, I think that must be strengthened with the kind of experience some of these NGOs have in the urban space. I think that can resolve. In fact, the reason I wanted to share that it is kind of insulated from most of the court cases. In a way, it is good, but it also violates the fundamental right as a citizen. And that sometimes, which seems to be working for the government, having quote and unquote, the lessening the implementation hurdles, so I think that is somewhere it is important to win the trust of the people who are already existing in these communities. Thank you.